Monreiro, Ambassador of the European Union to the Kingdom of Cambodia. His Excellency Tung Sili, the Secretary of State, Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation. His Excellency Dr. Chen Pulong, Secretary of State of the Ministry of Environment. Ognya Van Zo Ying, Chairman of GMAT. Along with the rest of the organizers, GGGI and JERES, as partner in this important event, ladies and gentlemen. My colleague and I wish to extend our most sincere appreciation to the organizers for extending an invitation to us. This kick-off event marks another milestone in the healthy debate on sustainable energy practices in general and in the government sector in Cambodia. As a player in the power sector, it gives me immense pleasure to share with you a few thoughts which could be useful to set the appropriate context as well as to provide some factual information for your convenient reference. In 2017, The Economist magazine ran a good article on renewable energy. It captures 5 features as follows. 1. The road to replace the traditional forms of energy with wind and solar power is very slow and costly. Almost 150 years after photovoltaic cells and wind turbines were invented, they still generate 7% of the world's electricity. Number 2, there need to be a huge sum of money in the tune of more than 20 trillion US dollars if we wish to have renewables taking over the traditional sources. Number 3, renewable energies work best when the grids are smart or equipped, digitalized, large storage capacity, large to reach out to faraway renewables, etc. And perhaps when the consumers are more conscious and have a bit of disposable income as well. Number 4, there must be a solution to the issue of subsidies for renewables, 800 billion worldwide since 2008 in subsidies alone. Number 5, challenges remain when it comes to the intermittent nature of renewables, thus the need to keep the traditional energy sources in the grid. Now that is global. In Cambodia, we have already begun a long and difficult journey with the world. This development reflects our unique and difficult history as well. As you know, we started our nation-building work after the destructive regime of the Khmer Rouge. If you look at this graph, if you allow me just one second. We didn't really go far to the Khmer regime in 2007 in 1979 to look at how much progress we have made. If you look at 2007, the supply available to our grid is a little compared to where we are today. We have made good progress in increasing the generation to support the economic development of Cambodia in general. And of course, along this development, the government sectors has been, I think, is nothing short of the term prosperous, employing many Cambodians and foreigners alike. So this graph is to highlight, to give the audience an idea of the context of what we are talking about. But also it alludes you to what kind of generation, what type of generation that is in the grid. How much solar is there, how much import is there, how much hydro is being generated. So you don't see much solar in the early days, but you're going to see a lot more now. I said, as you know, we started our national building work after the destructive regime of the Khmer Rouge, literally from 0 megawatts of real power, then to more than a few thousands now, with most of the investment comes from the private sector, both domestic and foreign. Although at present, our renewables are less than 5% in the total generation mix, our current efforts today, we see solar energy reach 9% in the overall installed capacity, or 14% compared to our expected peak demand by the end of next year. So, what I'm saying is that we have already begun our work aggressively in solar energy. By the end of next year, you will see at least 14% of solar energy in the generation mix at peak level, peak demand. If you compare to the installed capacity, at least 9% will be available. The plan is to keep increasing solar energy to the maximum level that can be, 1, supported by our grid without compromising the national grid stability, and 2, to be self-reliant in the sense that the Cambodian taxpayers would not be asked to subsidize. We believe that a fully responsible, sustainable energy policy is one that A, treats all sectors of the economy equally and fairly, B, all costs to society are fully calculated, and C, the cost of burden is shared by all, and D, no renewables will be added to the grid if they are to increase the cost of the consumers. Now, that is very important. We love clean, renewable energies, but these energies have to make sense for the Cambodian people as a whole. No renewable will be added to the grid if renewable is to increase cost to consumers. That is clear. With this in mind, we will continue to support all sorts of renewable energy that meets this criteria, especially grid-scale solar farms that have good potential for better value for the Cambodian people. Now, the audience may be interested in finding out our position. For example, on the one hand, are we going to promote large-scale solar farms? On the other hand, people may be wondering, why are we a bit more resistant? Not so much resistant, the key word would be, why are we not as generous to the deployment of rooftop, for example? It's very simple. At a given time, the grid can only support so much solar power. For example, it is the norm in the utility models that 15% of renewables of any kind combined at a given time may be an artificial level that a traditional grid can support. Now, why I emphasize the word traditional grid? Our national grid system, our transmission line networks that connects from province A to province B, it is not a grid like in the United States or Australia. Not yet. We don't have the money and the technology, especially the money, to go for an advanced grid system like the one that is available in Australia. Even at that level, Australia today has only roughly about 19%, 1/9 of renewables in its grid system. That basically covers wind and solar energy. In all ASEAN grids, in general, ASEAN 10, we could probably say that our grids are mostly the traditional grid that the world has seen to date. That means that, for example, if we are able to put 200 megawatts of solar into the system, the question for utility like EDC is this: how are we going to make use of 200 megawatts, for example? How are we going to make use of it in the best possible cases for the Cambodian people as a whole? would we allow these 200 megawatt to be deployed by any individual in the economy? Or would we rather reserve these 200 megawatts, for instance, for the whole Gabon people by investing in a smart way that we can derive the economy of scale and drive the cost down for everyone in the economy? And that is the question we are asking ourselves every day as we make decisions. As you know, in this case, solar energy is very intermittent. When we have the sun, we have the radiation, the solar radiation, we have energy. When we don't have radiation, when it's a cloudy day, when it rained yesterday, we don't have energy from the solar farm or from the rooftops. So what happens when we don't have energy? Somebody from some source of energy will have to come in to help. If we want to expect that the grid doesn't come down. If we lose 200 megawatts from the system over flick of an eye, the whole nation can go into the dark. So where do we take energy from? Hydropower, coal power, imported power, or other sources. And the cost of that backup power is a cost. It doesn't mean that the solar comes down, some other sources of energy will come for free. It's not. We wish it could happen, but it is not the case. So when the solar doesn't give us energy, hydropower comes in, coal comes in, imported power comes in, other forms of biomass comes in, for example. So if the cost is another backup energy, there's a cost. Then it's a second cost of the methodology or the approach that we can use at a given time. For example, like I said, if we have 200 megawatt solar energy quota to be added into the grid, would we use this in a way that derive a scale? We can derive at a scale and make the cost down, and the benefit will be shared equally by the Cambodian people and every sector in the Cambodian economy. Or we allow individuals to take charge of their own investment, but the collective benefits will be much smaller and cannot be equally shared. And this is where the issue of solar farm versus the rooftop comes in a little bit. Now, they're not contradictory, but they do have their own angles, do have their own benefits and drawbacks. For example, the last bidding of a 60 megawatt solar farm is at a cost of 3.48 cents per kilowatt hour. A rooftop solar user anywhere in town would not be able to match that cost. I can assure you in this room. So that's where you can see the difference. If we have 200 megawatts, would we allow every household to use 200 megawatt and use up the quota? And probably an average cost of 7-8 cents or plus? Or you look at a solar farm at 3, 4, 5 cents per kilowatt hour, and the benefit come from it will be shared by everyone in the Cambodian economy. Now, I'm not advocating solar farm versus rooftop. I'm not. Don't misunderstand. My position today is to try to set a context that, as we carry on this healthy debate, is something we should keep in mind. Because at the end of the day, your goals and our goal is the same. To make sure that the cost of energy is going to go down, so that it makes sense for investment. It makes sense for our government competitiveness. What would be the point of having a beautiful rhetoric about renewable, when at the end of the day, the cost is going to go up? I think Cambodia would be the first to complain about costs. So that is an issue that I would like you to know. So if you could look at the slide, my colleague could have put up that one, the cost. When I joined EDC as a managing director back in 2008, most of the country in Cambodia had electricity tariff at almost $1 per kilowatt hour. And only less than 40%, 50% of the people having access to power. Today, we can proudly claim and say, and it's factual, that more than 90% of our Cambodian villages are connected to the grid. That 83% of our total household in the country are already electrified by grid power. And that is a lot, because when we have the grid, the benefits of our collective effort can be equally shared. People in Posat now can enjoy the same tariff as people in Phnom Penh, in Banabong, in Kampong Cham, in Udon Binjay, in Onong Wen, in Stung Treng, for example. It's not one province getting. Before that, Phnom Penh had the lowest cost, and the poor of the poorest of the poor had to use the highest cost. So our pro-poor energy policy is one that ensures that energy is increasingly abundant to meet their social and economic needs. But at the same time, the issue of equity falls heavily in the decision makers' heads, basically. And today, because of that policy, because of that philosophy, we can see that the energy policy that we have today is increasingly become more and more pro-poor, because the poorest of the poor in any remote area of the country are using the cheapest power. If you look at 380 reals per kilowatt hour for the lowest bracket of the population, that is very good. The next one between the 11th kilowatt hour to the 50th kilowatt hour in a month at 480 real, that's good. Rich people can pay 700 plus real, that is good. So it reflects the increasing commitment by the government and EDC that the poorest of the poor also get a fair share of the benefit that this country has to offer. So with this in mind, as I said, we will continue to support all sorts of renewable energy that meets the criteria I said above, and we will continue to work with solar rooftop users who meet this criteria within the existing regulatory framework. Now, we are not averse to rooftop solar, but what we are asking rooftop solar users to do is to abide by the regulation in place, to respect the technical regulations. For example, we are having a big headache because most of the rooftop solar don't deploy a switch. That is that when an engineer go and operate a grid or repair a grid, usually we stop the power flow. Without this switch, it's connected. The power can go back from any rooftop installations, and it can cause deadly accident by engineer operating on the grid, for example. So this is something we expect. And it's a norm anywhere in the world. If you go to Australia, which is quite advanced around the Asia Pacific region, it is a must. You can't deploy solar rooftops without proper technical compliance, especially when they are connected to the grid. Now, there are two types of rooftops installation or solar usage. One is isolated. You don't make connection to the grid. In this case, you are more than welcome to do whatever you want. You don't have to care about regulation. Install on your rooftop, you use for your own system. You are not connecting the interface with the grid system. You don't have to care about the visibility or the technical parameters. It's your system. We have no problem. And the law and regulation today allow for that. But once you connect to the grid, there are grid requirements that you must abide, and that is the norm everywhere on the planet. So that's what I'm saying, that we will continue to work with solar rooftop users, but again, there are certain requirements that you must meet. So we're not going to say stop using. We don't say that, and we welcome that, but please within the regulation in place. This is very important for EDC as we are the grid operator, precisely because all users depend on us for both stability and cost. Stability means that they don't want market fluctuation. They don't want 2 hours off, 2 hours on. Even at this level, people still complain about stability, about power cut here and there. We still try to improve on that. We know there's a lot of work that needs to be done still. A lot more investment needs to go into that as well, including the need for the members of the public to help cooperate. It's no point when we build a good line and only for construction crane to touch the line and trip the system, for example. So we need all to cooperate to make it happen. It will take some time for sure. And everyone depends on EDC for cost reduction. Every year, we're going to ask ourselves, for example, now we're still asking ourselves, how can we do better on cost next year for every Cambodian? And foreigner who live in Cambodia, including embassies and foreign diplomatic corps and NGOs that operate in Cambodia. If EDC goes down, the whole Cambodia goes down. It is as simple as that when it comes to energy. So it is in the common interest, we believe, that the issue of stability and cost that EDC can provide to the Cambodian economy is at the center of this country development as well. Now we know, I have seen studies done by perhaps the Supreme National Economic Council and Ministry of Finance, that the costs of energy in the garment sector represent about 2 to 3%. Even at 2 to 3% cost in the overall cost of the garment sector, we are, believe me, we are your strong partner in exploring every possibility possible to make sure that the costs go down further in the future. We know that by saving 2 to 3%, it wouldn't solve the whole problem. There are a lot of bottlenecks to resolve. But we address the issue from energy by trying to see what can we do more for next year and the year beyond. If you look at, you go back to cost again, the cost diagram. No recent years that cost of energy go up for government sector or anyone in the industry or commercial sectors. And that reflects the success in some way by the energy the energy policy we are adopting. And we continue to hope that that trend, that downward trend, is going to continue. So again, we are on behalf of EDC. I'm going to work closely with everyone involved, including your esteemed organization, to make sure that we can even save a little bit more from the actual 2 to 3% cost in your actual cost calculation. As you may already know too, renewable energy is not what comes from the sun alone. We are actively exploring the potential of other types such as wind and biomass. But just before I go to that one, if I may just quickly come back. This is one of the most real-time data you can see for yourself. If you look at hydro today, and this actually came from the Monday, the 7th of September, when I asked my team to capture this screenshot for you. This is not made for PowerPoint presentation. This is actually a daily report from the National Control Center. Hydropower to this kind of rainy season, it represents well above 50%. As you can see, this is more than 60% there in blue. Solar is still 2+%, but like I said, and this week we are going to put into commission 30 megawatt solar in Posat. Almost immediately after that, another 60 megawatt, making 2021 For solar, 9% compared to installed capacity, at least 14% compared to peak demand. That's going up. So renewable energies has more than just one type of energy. It has solar, it can have wave energy, it can have wind energy, it can have other form of biomass that are renewable by nature and clean. So we are actively exploring the potential of other types such as wind and biomass. Hydropower, which is both clean and renewable, is also promoted. And by the way, under the ASEAN 10 definition of renewable, all kinds of hydropower is classified as renewable. We are happy to share with you that today, like I said, 65% during rain season, and even on average, hydropower accounts for almost 50% year-round on average. So if you put solar energy, biomass, and hydropower together, which is called renewable, it represents more than 50% in the current Cambodia generation mix. So when someone come and tell you that our energy is not very clean, I invite you to look at the numbers. Bangladesh, which is the second largest garment exporter after China in the world, solar power, to my knowledge, represents less than 2% today. And they can export quite handsomely. No, I'm not advocating for anything. I'm just setting the stage so that as we're conducting our conversation, let's have an informed debate on issues. Yes, we know that country cannot be compared on an equal footing without looking at the context within which policy exists or formulated. But still, it gives us an indication as some kind of loose references as to what we are talking about. What we are aspiring to do as well, it's not just what we are doing, but what we are aspiring to do. And you look at the plan. Let me see this one, I'm not sure. Oh, this is not a point. We are now going to call for another tender, 40 megawatt solar farm. And apart from this 40 megawatt, probably an additional 160 megawatt solar farms more at different locations to be added to the national grid. The idea and the vision is that in the next few years, we would like to increase the share of solar energy in its generation mix as a matter of installed capacity, at least 15%. If you look at this number with the rest of ASEAN 9 apart from Cambodia, Thailand is probably the most advanced. Thailand today, solar energy today, comes at around 7% in gross number. If you add other renewable forms into the generation mix, Thailand has about 12%. Japan and South Korea, East Asia, less than 5%, sure. Malaysia, less than 5%. So that is much less than 5%. I was talking to the second man of the TNB the other day. It's less than 2%, grossly. Singapore is trying to look into ways, because Singapore is very small, it's not so much conducive for solar. They try to do a few things on the rooftop, but still very small compared to the gas generation, for example. So we are going to increase our solar energy alone without looking at hydro. If you put this together, again, the number will shoot up about 50%. But solar energy alone, we are trying to increase that more. So 200 megawatts in the next few years, and a few more 100 megawatts. And of course, if you look at our prediction and as inspiration and objective by 2030, we are going to try to put at least
1,000 plus more megawatt.
So we are still discussing with the French company to look at ways if we can optimize their project and can come back to us at a low cost. We are still exploring. We are not actually calling that this is done. We are still exploring. We are excited about the opportunity. We are very excited. If we could have some wind power, that would add a nice color to our flag in terms of trying to promote renewable energy. But the cost restriction is an issue. Again, if you look at what I said earlier, if you just remember, I mentioned it in early days, I mean now, that we cannot call on the good people to subsidize a renewable. Before coming to this room, I was talking to GRS and GGGI about rubbish incineration, burning rubbish into energy. We are even there, we are exploring every day. But the issue is the cost likelihood is still a paramount concern. That the rubbish are not of good quality. Our rubbish is not properly sorted, mostly wet, a lot of dust, a lot of dirt in the rubbish. The quality of rubbish is not very good. So when you burn that into energy, the efficiency is very low. When the energy is very low, compared to the investment that you need to put into the power plant, it makes the unit costs of energy coming from that plant going to be potentially expensive. And if it's going to be expensive, the utility would lose the money compared to what could be sold to the users. The question then would be who is going to come to subsidize? Is it the Cambodian people, taxpayers, or another donor who comes in? Either way, it's not sustainable. So we are still exploring, jointly with the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economy. But it's still not yet there. It's not, we're not talking about it, but it's not yet there. We've been working, this year we've been working with the international consultant, KDMG, very renowned consulting firm of West Europe, to see what can be done. Even if the original price of that plan were to be, the energy cost would be at just break-even point, EDC would gladly embrace that one. We don't need to make money from renewable energy. We don't need to, and we don't want to. But what we want is a situation where additional renewable energy comes into our grid. It makes sense for no subsidy intervention. That's the idea. And also we want to make it sustainable. We don't want to reduce energy for you today only to increase energy cost to you tomorrow. It's not that before election you come and say, vote for us, and energy cost will go down, only to revise the cost after 2 years. We don't do that. We don't do that. And this is the way we want to do when it comes to renewable, and in particular, solar. Now, I was also sharing with friends just before coming to this room, the cost of solar panels and battery are not going down so much for the last 1 year. Quite a fast reduction for the last few years, but especially for the last 12 months, quite kind of stay where they were before. Now, you have to believe this. Now, I chose to share that one because we've been shopping around for solar panels, inverters, but we can tell that for the last 6 months or so to 8 months, the cost of solar panels and batteries very much stay where they were before that. Now, by sharing this information, I would also like to call on anyone interested in solar energy to participate in the upcoming 40 megawatt bidding. Now, this bidding project It's our project. It's a BO project. But we chose not to run the bidding by ourselves. EDC has chosen to engage the Asian Development Bank to be a consultant to run this bidding process for us. To avoid any sense of doubt that any time the government runs the project bidding, it's expensive. We don't do that. We are actually the observers to the bidding process. This is our own project. We can easily call for it and do by ourselves. But in the interest of transparency and a commitment to the wider world, we hired ADB consultants, ADB as a consultant, to do this upcoming 40 megawatt solar farm project. The land will be given by the government. The operator will just install and sell the energy to EDC on a take-or-pay basis. And we hope that it will replicate the 3.48 cents per kilowatt hour. We don't know whether we will have that price again, but at least we are hoping that it will be the case, or it will be lower. We'll celebrate that one as well. So, with that, I would like to share with you that, just before I finish this remark, that EDC has been and will continue to be a strong opponent of any hydro project on the Mekong Main Street. When it comes to selecting hydropower in the project pipeline for the future, we would not like to see any project on the Mekong Main Street. Because while we love energy, we are also passionate lovers of fish. I will share that with Madam Ambassador. And we hope that the EDC will do more to preserve our fish and the river ecosystem. And that is why we are exploring what lies ahead. We are watching the development of storage technology very carefully and seriously to see whether new storage technology would be less costly. If it were to be less costly on a scale that is commercially viable, then the path for energy policy in the future will be slightly different. But in the absence of any viable forms on a commercial scale, there is quite little room to have a complete breakthrough. Meaning to say that we will continue along this path more or less. But we could accelerate, for example, the deployment of solar energy much more aggressively if storage technology were to become less costly. Now you read newspapers, headlines about costs coming down. There have been some, for sure, promising yes. But to make a big difference today to the scale you want and we want, it's not yet possible. But we are around the corner, but not yet. That's why we are still putting a hope out there. Hope that a brighter day is still yet to come. I mentioned the Economist article for you. It's not meant to bring you back to the past, but to help you set the scene for the future. That it is difficult. It is not as straightforward as one would like to believe. But yet, solar energy has huge potential. The world still sees less than 10% of renewable, from solar in particular. But we believe that the world will be able to harness this power from the sun much more efficiently in the future. And EDC, as a part of that development process, will be with you in conducting a more informed debate. And we will do whatever we can to see if we can help you better. Because at the end of the day, we serve you. The energy that we provide to you should be helpful to what you're doing. It's not that we use energy for some people from Mars or another planet. It's for you. but we want you to be also a responsible partner with us so that the Cambodian people will not subsidize any of the things we do irresponsibly. That's what I'm asking for. And in this context, I would also like to thank GMAT once again, not for not only the invitation you have extended to us, me and my colleague, but also the many opportunities that you have afforded to us for many debates and exchanges of information. I would also like to once again thank Madam Ambassador for your valuable time. In fact, I have taken a lot more time than I had thought. Usually it tends to be the case that I'm conscious about. And I'd like to thank the European Union for its continued support to Cambodia in general, large investment, grant, and loan to Cambodia. EDC has been a good borrower of the French AFD for development of grid system and water. We are happy to see NGO like GRS and GGI come on board as well. So this is only the start of the conversation, I believe. It's not the end. And again, I sincerely hope that I can be your partner in this process, that together we're going to make a difference for Cambodia, especially the government sector that is an important one in the economy. With that, I thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you, Dr. Wang Suying. I thank you for, again, the opportunity to speak, but also to continue to answer some of the questions. A particular number is not exact until you come close to that time, because the percentage of the various sources in the generation mix varies according to demand. It's not an absolute fixed number. Having said that, I'm confident that even with the coal plant that the government has approved, it will not drive down the percentage of renewable into the generation mix, namely solar and hydro. But we are also exploring. The reason why I can say that, as you look at our inspiration and plan, we are increasing our solar much more. And as we speak today, we are conducting a few independent studies. One is being done by POIRI, one is being done by the Asian Development Bank, and another one is being done by the Japanese and us as well. We want to know what would be the maximum level, like I alluded you to in my remarks, that what would be the maximum level that the Cambodian national grid can tolerate from, say, solar source. It is the first and foremost question, the issue of stability, because Cambodian grid is connected, synchronized with the Vietnamese grid today. Some of the Cambodians on the floor here may be wondering, why are we connected with the Vietnamese grid? Why can't you be your own? Now, we could be. We could do two things. One is to cut off the grid from the Vietnamese, put more power plants in Cambodia. But what would happen? Two things would happen. One, what are we going to do? Put more coal, more hydro? If you put more hydro, how much damage it would do to the fishery resources, to the forestry resources? Is it necessary? It may not. And on top of that, our load today, Madam Ambassador and GMAT knows, is very skewed towards daytime. In a proper, well-functioned economy, and to have the efficiency, better efficiency from any utility, you see the day load and the night load would not be too far apart. But if you have this situation, the utilities can give you the cost at a low rate because the investment is well utilized. Imagine in Cambodia where daytime is 2,000 megawatts, nighttime is less than 800 or 900. So what to do with the 1,000 megawatt we reserve for you? someone has to pay for it. So that is where the problem comes in. So if we are connected to Thailand or Vietnam, for example, we don't have to encroach upon the environment to make more dams, because we can take a little bit of supplementary power from Vietnam or Thailand. And we can reduce the cost for you, because we don't have to have a sitting or 2 or 3 sitting power plants just to feed in a few hours during peak time, because you don't utilize 24 hours of those facilities as investment anyway. So that saves cost for you. Now by connecting the grid of Vietnam, and Vietnam is more than 40,000 megawatts. We are less than 2,000 megawatts. Thailand is more than 40,000 megawatts. We are less than 2,000 megawatts today. By packing our grid system to those, we are actually enjoying a special advantage by allowing us the opportunity to increase our solar a little bit more for you. Left to us alone, in the absence of no major traditional power plant like coal or gas, we could never deploy additional renewables to the tune that we want, 15% of the installed capacity, for instance, in the next few years. Because if we were to put 15% without depending on the neighboring country grids, if we lose 15% from a rainy day, the whole Cambodia will go into darkness. Power is about synchronization, about a perfect balance. If at any given time the economy uses 2,000 megawatts, for some reason, if we are short by even 1-2 megawatts, technically speaking, the system goes down. The whole country goes into darkness. It will take at least several hours at the very minimum to restore the power back to the economy. That's the problem. So, going back to the question that was raised by Chairman Van Suyen, we are going to keep increasing. If other sources go up, renewable also go up. If there is any breakthrough more in terms of storage technology at cost level, we will accelerate, for example, solar energy injection to the grid, period. Because we want to be clean too. We love our forest too, we love our air too. And at the end of the day, we want to make costs go down for you. It makes political sense for us as well as politicians, for example. We don't want to go to the next election and be faced with question about costs. We don't like it, but it's something we have to live with, some reality we have to live with. For your information, there are no 2 countries on this planet that we know share the same energy costs. The 10 ASEAN countries have different cost structures. Vietnam, cheapest around here compared to Thailand and Cambodia. Thailand is cheaper than us, but we are getting closer on an industrial, commercial, industrial scale. We are very close to Thailand already. But again, we are a 2,000 megawatt economy versus a 40,000 plus megawatt economy. It's very different scale. You can't even start to compare the 2 scales. Singapore is more expensive than us. The Philippines mostly expensive than us, more expensive than us. Hong Kong certainly more expensive than us. Japan, of course, much more expensive. No question about it. So 50% of the US states are more expensive than Cambodia. The other 50% of all the states, 50% of the states in the United States are lower than Cambodia. Each 50 state has different cost structures. That is the reality of the world we live in today. And all the member countries in the European Union don't have the same costs. So, the question is though, why don't we have same cost? It's not possible, period. Because each country pursues its own policy, largely dependence on the natural endowment that it has, For example, Singapore doesn't have hydropower because the land, the nature of the country is too small. It's a city-state. We can have some hydro. Thailand, Vietnam has some hydro. That's one. Vietnamese has cheap coal. We don't have cheap coal. When we procure coal at a ton of $80, actually it used to be more than $100 per ton. The Vietnamese utility got coal from a state-owned coal company, Vinacomin, at $40 a ton. Less than 50% of the market price international. Heavily subsidized by the state. We don't have that cheap coal, for example. We have to import coal from Indonesia. And to do with the cost, the philosophy also. Now, I want to be very frank with you as much as I can be. In Japan, for example, I think also in Singapore. Now, there may be some Singaporeans here. If I'm wrong, let me know. The philosophy is one that let's put the industry first. Meaning to say that the cost of energy going to industry should be cheaper than the cost of energy going to residential customers. Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, or probably all the ASEANs I know except Singapore. The other way around. That the cost to the household should be cheaper than the cost to the industry because the household needs to be supported. That is philosophy that many countries adopted, including Cambodia. Japan is different. Japan, the cost to the household is more expensive than the cost to industry because the concept rests in the idea that industry is the one that makes the money. If there is no industry, there's no family. Period. Here in Cambodia, we join many countries in the world by having the opposite. That the households need to be supported. If there are no households, there's no industry. You see the philosophy difference? And that has nothing to do with natural endowment. That has everything to do with a decision that societies make for themselves. In this case, Cambodia is one of the societies that make this decision for themselves. So that you see the cost structure reflects not only the natural endowment of a nation at a particular point in time, but also what kind of philosophy that a nation adopts for itself and its people. So, a bit long, but again to recap, I will not believe that our generation will be the composition of that will differ because of coal plant. It's not new, by the way. This coal plant is going to give us power in 2 years' time. The one in Singapore will be built probably in 2 years' time. But it does not mean that as we increase coal, for example, we are going to see this renewable coming down. We are not going to see that. Not going to see it. Even though today we are going to be more picky in hydropower. We used to be more generous, to be very honest with hydropower projects. In terms of, because in the early days, we didn't have power. So what to do? We had to scramble with something. But now as we are getting a bit more mature, a little bit, and we do have different choices, and our political stability provides for a better investment climate, that investors are continuing to come and invest in energy. It basically equips EDC with more choices. So that means that going forward, we are trying to pick any hydropower that has less impact on the environment, for instance. I couldn't say what I just said minutes ago. If you were to see me, you have seen me, for example, 5 years ago. Today, I can proudly say that we do not need
to develop any hydropower on the Mekong mainstream for the needs of energy in Cambodia. We do have the choices. We need to protect our fish. We need to protect our ecosystems. I personally, as a passionate fan of fish, I've been hearing Madame Buster many times. Will make sure that as long as I am at EDC, I will do everything I can to make sure that EDC is not a partner in any development on the Mekong mainstream. Yes. Any more before I?
ចាសូមក្រុមឯកជនអាដាមហើយបើអាចមានសំណួរតទៅទៀតបើសិនជាអាចមានទេនាងខ្ញុំសូមអនុញ្ញាតអរគុណទៅដល់មានសំណួរ
Gentleman over there, please sir. If you could identify yourself from the organization you come.
Yes, hello. My name is Harry Volda. I'm the managing director of Cambodia. We're a solar energy company. I would like to know what's your vision about electric vehicles. Don't you think this will have a big impact on the future generation mix?
Very good question indeed. I actually look forward to talking with partners who are interested in the project. I have received one or two in the past. I've asked my colleagues to talk to them, but I would like to talk how we can partner with companies that want to deploy electric vehicle, for instance. But again, what I have to let you know is that we would do a lot of things. We can do a lot of things. But what we would not like to go into is a situation where EC is going to ask to subsidize. Not that we don't want to. It's tempted. It's tempting. We are tempted by subsidizing folks. But we know for sure that first is market distorting. Secondly, it's not sustainable. And I like so much when we talk about sustainable energy policy. Subsidy is not sustainable. It can be temporary relief until something more permanent is found. For example, today, to make the tariff at this level for industry, for other types of users of energy, EDC on behalf of the Cambodian government is subsidizing almost $100 million per year. Left to themselves, nobody could provide power at 480 real, 380 real, or 610 reals. Not possible. And industry can try for itself if it doesn't believe EDC. You put a genset for yourself, and you know the cost. It's not going to be possible. This level of subsidy across the nation is made possible because we are subsidizing $100 million a year. We are helping making this tariff down. But to go further than that, EDC would not be in a fiscal position to do that. But other than that, provide technical support, places where you want to deploy your vehicles, how we can do anything apart from cost. I am committed to helping. If you know anyone who would like to do that, send it to me. Just don't ask me for subsidy. I don't have the money because I cannot go to the Cambodian people or to the government sector, please raise the cost for me because I want to subsidize electric vehicles. But I would love to see a city like Siem Reap, Phnom Penh, for instance, can begin to deploy some of those because these are crowded areas. Siem Reap being our cultural capital, more or less. It's a symbol, civilization cradle. We hope we can do more. You know, the Prime Minister recently announced a new initiative to improve the infrastructure in Siem Reap, and I've been appointed as a member on that task force. And I look forward to the opportunity to not only chip in from energy side in terms of what my views is with regard to road development or expansion, and how to take my poles away so that they can enlarge the road. But I would also look forward to the opportunity to share with them that perhaps something like what you said can make a lot of sense for a city like Siem Reap. Yeah, it would be nice to see Siem Reap mostly operated on electric vehicles of some kind. We'll explore. Thank you, sir.
សូមអរគុណអាដាមមានសំណួរទៅកាន់អាដាមទៀតចាអត់មានទេនេះជាឱកាសតែបើអត់មានទេនាងខ្ញុំនឹងអាចជំរាបជូនអាដាមទាំងអស់ឲ្យលោកសម្រាប់ចា
Okay, it seemed a no question. Either I did a bad job or it was okay. Either way, thank you so much for the attention.